shocked when someone didn't be listed in the part of this.
I don't think you know.
That's a very exciting thing. Someone shows you, hey, here's what you gotta do. At least you fly. All the way through getting my second interview, I still thought that there's no way it's not going to be person.
So very careful with what
You mentioned your one family holiday records.
That's good.
Oh, okay. So because it's coming down. So you should be alright. On there? It looks pretty loud. But I'm wondering if you got tanks for the Astronaut. I think it's pretty loud. I don't know. Did you have a problem? I thought he was louder than the kids are.
talking to Mr. Vande and I was saying that the group that we have here has a lot different energy. You guys, I can tell, are really excited to be here, and we're excited to have you. So I'm Mrs. Willett, I'm your principal. We are going to be live streaming this event, so we have members of the public who might be listening in this morning too. So I want to go over our expectations for assembly behavior, right? You clearly are demonstrating it right now. You're sitting on your bottoms, your hands are in your laps, your mouths are closed, and you're looking at the speaker. So thank you very much, because today is a special day. My job is to introduce our special guest speaker. And so I've written a couple notes because today is just such a special day for us here at PELC. Mr. Mark Vande was able to speak with us last December when he was working on the International Space Station. Give a thumbs up if you remember that. Yeah, that was a really cool event for us here at school. So now he's returned to Earth and he wanted to come up here and see us himself. So that's why he's here today. Isn't that neat? So before he begins, I want to tell you a little bit more about him. It's important that we know about all the hard work and dedication that Mr. Vande put into his studies and his training, which helped him prepare to be an astronaut on the ISS. Mark grew up in many places, including Virginia, New Jersey, and Minnesota. After attending school at 2 different universities, he served our country as both a combat engineer, platoon leader, and a cold weather training officer. So he knows a little bit about cold weather like we do here, right? You think he knows how to be prepared when it's cold? Some of you might be thinking about that too. So later, as an Army Space Support Team Leader, Mr. Vande was deployed to Iraq for 12 months in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. So he also served as a physics professor at West Point Military Academy, and part of his work there was participating in research projects, which included designing experiments and analyzing data. And I know our 5th and 6th graders know a lot about designing experiments and analyzing data. So that's part of what he did. Next, he reported to Johnson Space Center, and he helped communicate with the astronauts that were in outer space there from Mission Control Center, and that's located in Houston. While he was there, he trained to be an astronaut, and he got to experience several different space flights. When we last heard from Mr. Vande, he was serving as a flight engineer aboard the ISS. After 355 days in space, he set the US record for the longest single space flight. So that is an incredible accomplishment. Yeah, we can clap for that. I agree, that is something worth celebrating. So while he was on board the ISS, he worked to take care of the station itself, and then he also had goals that were set for science, and he worked with crews from all over the world. While he was there, he spent a total of 523 days in space altogether, and 26 hours, 42 minutes were outside of the spaceship conducting spacewalks. That's pretty cool to imagine too, isn't it? So today is a very special day for all of us here at PELC, but most especially for our 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Van Voren, because astronaut Mark is her cousin. Isn't that neat? Yeah. Oh, some of them didn't know that. Yeah, well, we can talk about that too. So, in closing, NASA receives thousands of requests throughout the year to have an astronaut come and speak places, and they picked our school today, which makes it really special for us. So we're very fortunate to have him visit our school, and I'd love for us to give him a round of applause to welcome him and also thank him for his time.
Good morning. Thanks for all of your enthusiasm. I'm looking forward to talking to you for a little bit here, and then we're going to do a question and answer session for the bulk of the time. So I'm going to start off with a video. Let's get right to it. When I went to the space station on this most recent flight, I was a member of Expedition 65 and 66. To get to the space station, I launched on a Russian spacecraft at the launch facility in Baikonur, Kazakhstan. That is in Central Asia. The suit is sealed up with a rubber band. It works really well. That keeps it airtight. Once we got suited up, we climbed the ladder to get to the elevator, waved goodbye. It was a nice sunny day that day, so when I got to the top of the elevator, it was nice to be able to see the surrounding countryside. Those are my 2 crewmates, both were from Russia. When you first get up into the spacecraft, you have about 2 hours of checking things out as you sit at the very top of that rocket, and everybody else needs to get to safety. You check out to make sure your suit's good, that the spacecraft's working properly, and then next you launch. It's lots of noise and violence from the outside, but inside, it's a surprisingly smooth ride as you quickly surpass the speed of sound and leave all that noise and violence behind. The predominant sound, actually, while we were launching, was the sound of the pumps pushing all that fuel to the back of the spacecraft, and you can see it's a pretty smooth trip. After twice around the planet, and getting rid of some stages of the rocket, like you see here, which took a total of 3 hours trip, 3-hour-long trip, we got to the space station. That's what the space station looked like as we approached. We eventually docked to the space station, connected, spent about 2 hours doing leak checks to make sure that we had a safe way to enter, open the hatches, and set a load of the crewmates on board. The entire reason we're on the space station is to do science. At any given time, there's between 60 and 100 experiments going on. Many of those, of course, we don't interact with. Some we do, like to take care of some plants. The nice thing about that is, this experiment, we got to eat some of them. The hatch chili peppers we grow, of course, float in space when you let go of them. And we had a lot of fun eating. Like, every time we had meals together, we had fun. The space environment is unique. So if you squeeze a towel that's soaked with water on the ground, it would drip. But in space, it just makes a big puddle of water around the towel. If you make a bubble of water in space, it floats around and you can move it with straws. We're concerned about keeping people's eyes healthy on the space station as they have longer and longer trips. So we did testing on the astronauts to make sure their eyes are healthy. There's a lot of facilities on the space station. This particular one's a very cold freezer that we use to send samples to the ground with after we freeze them. There's glove boxes. Notice as I'm moving around to work on the science project, I keep hooking my feet in different places. You can work on the floor, hook your feet sideways, hook them to the ceiling. That's inside of one of the glove boxes as we're doing some science experiments. There's a combustion facility, so we try to understand how flames work. They're different in space than on the ground. The whole time I was up there, 27 different people came and visited and departed. Lots of wonderful people. People from Germany, France, Japan. We even had a Russian movie actress come on board and film producer. You can do lots of things that are fun, playing with the environment. I definitely cannot do this on the ground. And the way you eat on the space station, there's lots of variety of food. You can rehydrate things in our potable water dispenser. We've got a little tiny oven. You can just open some things like tortillas. You open the package, you can heat it right away. We've got lots of tape on our dinner table because when you put something on the dinner table, it won't stay there unless you stick it to the table. We had spacewalks while I was on board, both from the Russian segment as well as on the US segment. Each of those spacewalks takes between 6 and 8 hours. Lots of work. You can see them working outside. And also we deployed solar arrays during those spacewalks to increase the power production. The space station works like a port. We had a vehicle visit about once a month. Most of those were taking supplies up to the space station. People would depart. But we even on this flight had 2 new modules that attached to the space station. It was like adding rooms to your house. After all that activity, though, it was time to say goodbye to my friends. I got back on the spacecraft. We let go of the latches. We kind of just hopped off the space station very, very gently. Once we got far enough away, we fired thrusters to change our orbit. That made us intersect the atmosphere again, and the atmosphere started slowing us down. Out the window, over my shoulder, that's what it looked like as we were going through the heat of re-entry, and the heat shield was melting away. The next part you have to wait for is the parachute open. The parachute open is a very happy moment because that's the time you know you're actually going to survive. And then you have to wait for the next exciting moment when you hit the ground, because you actually do hit the ground that hard. Yeah, I was surprised. But it all worked quite well. And then the search and rescue forces were there to meet us. Once you have spent so much time in space, you feel kind of wobbly because you're not used to having to balance. So the crew that there to meet you helps pull you out of the spacecraft. They treat you very gently. And I was really excited to be home. I have no idea why I picked those sunglasses. I did. It was nice to feel the sunlight on my face and feel the wind. That's my commander for the spacecraft, Anton, and that's Piotr. He spent all 355 days with me. After this picture was taken, within 24 hours, I was back in Houston and saying hello to my wife and children again. And that's a real quick 355 days and 6 minutes. But wait, there's more. I'm going to need 2, 3 demonstrators. So if you raise your hand, if you'd like to help me out, I'll pick you out. I'm probably going to pick people from the front because it's convenient. And you come up here. What's your name? Lexi, would you mind being the earth for me? Come on up. And stand right here on this red line. Okay, Lexi, this is the earth. I want you to imagine that this standard size basketball is the earth, okay? And then, at that scale, this would be the size of the moon, a tennis ball. How about you come on down? Yep. I like your shirt, by the way. What's your name? Micah, come on down. Okay, Micah's going to be the moon. You can stand on the red line here. Okay, now who wants to be Mars? That's fine. How about a flannel shirt? All right, come on up. What's your name? Hattie. Come on over, Hattie. All right, Hattie, you're going to have to be a little patient because I'm going to use you towards the end, okay? Just stand by. Okay, so that's roughly the scale of the Earth, basketball, the moon, a tennis ball, and that size 1 mini soccer ball is the size of Mars. That's about the size of these objects relative to each other. So imagine that at the end of this pin, that's the space station. So when I went into space, this is how far away from the Earth I was. About that far. That's 240 miles above the Earth. So I did not go, the Earth is so big, that doesn't look very far away at all. But 240 miles away, 1/10 of that, 24 miles away, that puts you far enough outside the atmosphere that you can't survive there without supplemental oxygen. But that's what I did. Now, we have sent people to the moon, and when they were on the moon, they took that picture of the Earth. That's what the Earth looks like from the moon. So what I want you guys to do, my Earth and moon, to go ahead and make a guess at this scale how far apart you should be from each other. What do you think? Do you think that's the right distance? Okay. Now, the reason I'm doing this demonstration is because even after 6 years of studying space physics, when I saw the real distance these should be apart, I was really surprised. So what I want you to do is grab the end of that string and keep going until the string tells you to stop. Go head towards the principal there. Keep going. Okay, good enough. So that's how far the moon is from the Earth. If the moon were a basketball, if the moon were a tennis ball and the Earth were a basketball. It's really far. Let's drop the string. So imagine how amazing it is that we were able to successfully launch little tiny people from over there, then actually get to the right spot on the moon. That's really impressive. And I'm really excited because we've got a spacecraft we've already built that's going to put people back into the city to the moon again. And we tried twice already to launch the spacecraft. We had issues, but it's a test flight. We're going to launch the first time without people in the spacecraft to make sure it's safe for people. But that's going to come up in November. We're going to try again. And then by 2024, we're hoping to launch people back to the city of the moon. And I'm excited about that because I really hope that this is a part of the stepping stone to get people to land on the moon again. Now, let's talk about Mars. Because Mars is someplace we want to go to. What we learn about traveling to other places when we go to the moon is going to help us get to Mars. So, do you like running? How far apart do you think you should be from the moon, from the Earth, way down there, if you're Mars? Actually, you have to be so far away, I actually don't want you to run, because you have to leave the building. So, all of you imagine that the Earth is at the lower left corner of that tennis court. That's your school. And then if you imagine that if we had you run all the way to the far side of the football field, that's how far away Mars is going to be. It's really far away. So, I think if it doesn't happen during my lifetime, that it could happen during your lifetime, that we get human beings to Mars for the first time. So, could be one of you, could be one of the astronauts that sets foot for the first time on Mars. So let's give a big round of applause to my demonstrators. scale of how big the things are that we're getting ready to do and how exciting and challenging those will be. The next thing I want to do before we get to question and answer session, though, is help share with you the beauty of the place that we are destined to live right here on the Earth. Because the views that I got on the space station were so amazing that I don't think I'd be doing my job if I didn't find some way to share those views with you. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn the lights down low, and I'm going to stay quiet. We're going to turn the music up, and I'm going to show you a video for a couple minutes. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Thanks for letting me share that with you. And with that, let's do questions and answers. I think the principal coach should come on up. I'm not sure who's going to be first.
It's always hard being the first one. Come on down.
My name is Austin, and my question is, what's the coolest thing you have seen in space?
The coolest thing I saw in space was the northern and southern lights. Did you see in the video the green? That's if you in this part of the country you might get the chance to see that if you go a little farther north. It's really amazing from space. It looks like it's this ghostly greenish gray. Yeah, I felt very privileged to get to see it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Easton, and I want to know what's the first thing you wanted to do when you got back?
The first thing I wanted to do when I got back was eat guacamole and chips.
Great.
Thanks.
My name's Parker, and what was your favorite thing to do in space?
My favorite thing to do in space was look out the window. My second favorite thing to do was read books. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Braxton, and did you ever find any weird creatures or something that you have never seen before?
I did not find any weird creatures, anything that I had never seen before, but one of NASA's objectives is to look for life in the universe. So that's part of our nation's space program, is to try to find evidence of life, and we are still looking because we think the chances are good, but we haven't found anything yet.
Hello, my name is Henley, and my question is, what discoveries have you made about growing plants in space?
Oh, great question. Growing plants in space is a little difficult because if you want to grow things in a potted plant, for example, with the soil, it would be really easy to disturb the soil and have the soil start floating around and make a big mess. So one of the things we do is, it turns out that the plants just grow towards the light, so that helps out a lot. And then to keep the soil in place, we have kind of envelopes that we have. So all the soil is contained in the envelope, and there's a slit in the envelope where the seedling can grow through and come out of the envelope. And then to provide food, fertilizer, and water to the plant so it can continue to grow, we just use a syringe, and we push the syringe of fluid right into the envelope so that doesn't go all over the place too. Thanks.
My name is Jax. What did it feel like to walk with gravity again?
Standing back on the Earth, it felt I felt wobbly. So I could not fall down when I was on the space station. I didn't have to balance the entire time. So when I first got back, it was surprising how when I leaned over a little bit, how heavy my head and my upper body felt. So I had a tendency to be surprised and have to put my hand out. Or if they had to do some tests where I walked like this to see how well I could balance. And when I first came back, I walked more like this. Because it was very uncomfortable. And then when I closed my eyes, I couldn't tell which way was up because my body hadn't adjusted to that. So as soon as I lost my visual reference for which way was up and down, I would just fall over. So, thank you.
My name's Carter, and what does it feel like in space and when you get back?
What does it feel like in space when you get back? So one of the things that happens when you get to space is we experience a fluid shift. So the fluids in our bodies kind of tends to drift towards your head. So you feel a little puffy, you get more congestion. It kind of feels like something's holding you up by your feet, but you can't get out of that situation. So it's a little uncomfortable. But eventually, humans are very adaptable and you get more comfortable with that. It feels like you have a lot of freedom of motion in space. If I was working in here and we were in space and this room was falling towards the Earth, but going so fast horizontally that it just kept missing it, that's what was going on for me in space. If I wanted to work on the ceiling, at one point I was so comfortable that I could just have my arms crossed or flip upside down and hook my feet on the ceiling and start working. It was really fun. We even would sometimes play a game where we tried to see who could do the most flips before they ran into the ceiling. So I got it to 4. I was really proud of that. Thanks. Oh, and then when I came back to the ground, did you ask me that too? How did it feel?
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt wobbly, but I just felt so happy to see everybody here. Thank you.
My name is Kelton. My name is Kelton. Do you celebrate holidays on the ISS?
Yes, we did celebrate holidays on the ISS. In fact, it turns out when you decorate Christmas cookies, for example, you can actually, in space, you can make the frosting and make it 3-dimensional. So I made a really cool snowman with like 3 balls of frosting on top. And then someone actually took all the cookies and tried to make a little mini space station using frosting as glue. So it worked a lot. It was really fun making cookies in space. We celebrated people's birthdays. We didn't have cakes and flame and candles on top of the cake. But what we did is we had someone with we had brownies and we stuck a little lollipop that looked like a candle in the cake. So we found ways to celebrate. Thanks.
My name's Jace, and have you ever experienced solar storms?
That's a great question. It's something we're concerned about, but I never experienced a solar storm. Now, the reason we're concerned about solar storms is because the radiation risk goes up. And there are procedures in place where they might tell us to move to a particular place in the space station that's better protected from radiation if there is concerns about an intense solar storm. But we never had that happen while I was on board. Thank you.
And then also, how do you get into the space station?
How do you get into the space station? So let's see. You have the space station is a spacecraft. The other spacecraft that is approaching, that you're in, comes up to it, you connect. And then you have this space in between the two. You basically have to get the pressure in your spacecraft, the space between the two, and where the space station to be equal. And that way, the air doesn't push too hard on one part or the other. Once that's equalized, then it's really easy to open the hatch and you can just move between the two. Thank you. Go ahead.
My name is Landon, and how do you get food in space?
How do we get food in space? There's a logistics system that makes sure they ship up food to the space station, and they try to make sure there's 6 months supply at any given time on board. And then we have to make sure that we use the stuff that before it expires. But sometimes, literally, sometimes we don't keep up with that, and we have to throw food away. But otherwise, we have people that their job is to make food and ship it up to us in time so that we have enough.
Also, I have another question that I just thought of now. Has anyone ever died from space food?
Nobody has ever died from space food that I know of, and hopefully that will never happen. That would be and hopefully, one of the things as human beings we're really good about is noticing that if food is spoiled, a lot of times we can smell it, or it doesn't seem very appealing, so hopefully we'll just not eat it.
What happens if you run out of food?
There's been concern, so the question was, what happens if we run out of food? There have been concerns about that in the past. In fact, some people had to eat less food than they would have liked because we ate too much, or things didn't make it. A cargo spacecraft trying to deliver food, maybe it didn't work, and we had to delay the food arrival, so we had that happen. They try to ship the next load of food up to us quickly. That's all I can really say. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Isabella, and my question is, has an asteroid ever hit and damaged the ISS?
Has an asteroid ever hit or damaged the ISS? We've had things called micrometeorites hit the space station, and the space station was designed recognizing that we're putting things into low Earth orbit, and there's other stuff there that might hit it. So there's multiple layers of shielding around the space station, and the space station has been hit, but it's never penetrated all the way through all the layers. So what happens is the energy gets spread out more and more as it goes through other layers. But what that means is, as it goes through, it's at such a high speed that it has made sharp edges. So when we do spacewalks, we've got gloves that we hold onto the space station with, and if those gloves had a hole, we would start losing our atmosphere from inside. So they don't like us to slide our hands along the handrails because we might slice a glove. And also, when we know that there's a sharp edge, we get warned about those places, and we're careful to make sure that we don't touch it. In fact, in some cases, we've actually put a clamp to cover the sharp edge to make sure that nobody could cut a glove on the sharp edge. Thank you.
And my other question is, how long does it take to get to the ISS?
The time it takes to get to the space station has decreased over time. So at first, the Soyuz spacecraft that I flew on used to take 2 days to get to the space station. And then by the time that I flew on my first flight, it only took 6 hours. So 4 times around the planet, and then we were at the space station. On this most recent flight, I think I was on the second flight that only took 3 hours. And I thought that was a really good deal because we didn't have to stay in that little tiny compartment for very long at all. Thanks.
Hi, my name's Carly, and my question is, how do you sleep in space?
How do you sleep in space? We have sleeping bags. The space station is like living in a house, so the temperature is comfortable. You don't need a lot of warmth from your sleeping bag, but you really need something to hold you in place so you don't bump your head into things while you're sleeping. The sleeping bag has a zipper. The big difference, though, is that it's got 2 armholes. So when I slept on the space station, I would sleep like this, because my arms would be outside the sleeping bag and they would just float in front of me. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
My name's Nora, and how fast does the space station go?
What a great question. The space station moves 5 miles every second. It's really fast. Now, earlier I mentioned that being in space is really just like being in a place where the room is falling towards the center of the Earth and moving so fast horizontally. The reason we're moving that fast horizontally is that's how we keep missing the Earth, because otherwise the Earth's gravity is always pulling us towards the center, and that's how we stay in orbit. Thank you.
My name is Kate, and what's the longest you've stayed in space?
The longest I stayed in space continuously was 355 days. Thanks.
My name is Madeline, and how heavy is an astronaut suit?
Oh, how heavy is an astronaut suit? So I'm going to talk about, it depends on this. There's multiple suits. We've got one suit that probably weighs about 20 pounds. That's an estimate. That's the suit that I had to walk to the spacecraft in. I'm glad I didn't have to walk super far, because it's kind of stiff, it's kind of tiny. It's a suit designed to hold you in a fetal position where you're sitting down. It's hard to stand up in. But the suit that we use to do spacewalks in, that suit is like a mini spacecraft because it's got its own life support system, it's got oxygen tanks. It's so heavy that I could not walk in that suit. In fact, when they put us in the water to train in that suit to do spacewalks, they have to lower us in a crane into the water. It's probably more than 100 pounds, but I don't know the exact answer, so please don't quote me on that. I just know it's heavy.
And how long does it take to get to space?
It depends. Again, I would say anywhere between 3 hours and 2 days. Actually, let me change that. So getting into space is basically as soon as you are in a situation where you're no longer accelerating, you're just in orbit. That took us about 8.5 minutes before we got to the point where the engines were all shut down and I was in orbit going around the Earth waiting to get to the space station. So really about 8.5 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ethan. How do astronauts fix things, especially when you're outside the ship?
So we fix things with tools, just like you do on the ground. In fact, we get a lot of maintenance training, so we even got to help repair aircraft to make sure we had a set of skills we could apply to whatever situations come up. But there are things that are different. For example, if I had to drill a bolt out, let's say we couldn't get, the bolt was stripped, then if you're going to drill in space, that makes little metal shavings, and there's a big risk that those shavings would go all over the place. So we put shaving cream on the bolt to help hold all of the metal shavings before we went ahead and drilled. When you're outside, if you're using tools and you want to hold on to things, it can be really challenging controlling your tools, controlling yourself, making sure you stay where you want to be outside the space station. So every tool we use has a place to attach a tether to it. And one of the things that's really important to do is make sure that you always stay connected to your tools so that you can, if you let go of them, they stay attached to you.
Okay, another question. Do you guys have fun sometimes?
We had fun all the time. I had fun just having meals with people and someone cracking a joke. We laughed really hard. Sometimes there was funny things people said just because there's language things and we have to explain that what they said probably wasn't really what they intended to say. We watched, every week we got together for a complete group dinner where either the Russians would host the dinner on their segment with their food, or the US segment would host the dinner with our food. We also got together and had a movie night once a week. We found the best thing for our crew is if we had the meal one day, because we talked so long, and then the next day we'd have the movie. And what else did we do? I liked doing space stunts. So one of my crewmates, Kayla Barron, she is a naval officer. She and I started trying to practice doing like synchronized flips, where we do a flip, hit our hands, it would make us spin in a different direction, and we had a lot of fun with that. Thank you.
Well, this group of students has been really attentive for us this morning. We've got about 2 or 3 minutes. Is there anything that you'd want to share with us or anything that you'd like to close our assembly with in terms of extra information that maybe didn't come out in the question session?
Sure. So a lot of people ask me, what does it take to become an astronaut? And I would say you always got to do your best. and try, in fact, put some effort into try to make your best better. But we need people that are really big team players on the space station or that travel into space. It turns out that if you're going to have a successful expedition, be it to the top of Mount Everest or to the moon or Mars, the interpersonal skills you have are much more important than the technical skills because you've got to work together. So even though I want you to always try to be your best, put more effort into the people around you also being their best than you standing out as always being better than other people around you. So be a team player. Also, I'd say look for opportunities to do challenging things. As a human being, we don't like failing. But to grow, to go ahead and challenge yourself, to learn new skills, to learn about yourself. Sometimes you've got to do things where you're not sure if you're going to succeed or fail. So go ahead and take those risks and learn from the challenges. Even if you fail, hopefully you'll succeed. Try really hard to succeed, but risk that failure. And also, someday when you want to apply to be an astronaut, go to usajobs.gov. That's how you do it. That's how you apply.
Well, when I was listening to your words about teamwork and being part of a team, it made me think of something that we sing here every Friday. Mr. Licky, our music teacher, is such a good sport. I asked him if he could come up here and lead us in our school spirit song that you guys know a lot about. Do you think we could perform that for Astronaut Mark right now? Because it's all about teamwork. That's how we'll close out our assembly, okay? Come on up. You guys, you got to sing with us.
Oh
ready?
Yeah, go ahead and sing along with me. 1, 2, 3.
I'm just one person, but I'm part of a team. If we work together, we can do some great things. Let's do what's right everywhere we go. We're making a difference here at Peshtigo.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, thanks to Mr. Ricky for always jumping in and doing all the crazy things I asked. That was really special. I want to say thank you so much for you coming and visiting with us here today. I'd like to also acknowledge our PTSO organization. You guys are doing all those great fundraising activities, and those monies that we raise come right back here to our school to do some amazing things. So let's give a big warm welcome, round of applause to